Okay, let's begin then, because this is 201. Salim sir, please proceed.
Yes, please. Should we start now?
Yes, can you confirm if you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Anka. This is Salimuddin
Okay,
from
because I
Synergy.
tried earlier and I'm not sure if you heard me because I was not hearing anyone.
You have been given the right for the host as well, and whatever you want to share, you can. Dr. Ismani, can you please introduce her to the participants, please?
Sure. First of all, I request all the participants to please mute the mic. Amir Nazir, please mute your mic. Okay. Amir Nazir is not responding. Okay. Dr. Anka, it's really good to see you today. This is Abdul Wahid Spani. Let me quickly give you the background of this workshop, this session. Last year, we initiated a diploma program, postgraduate diploma in quality in higher education. The contents were based on the local needs as well the international requirements. When I say local needs, I simply mean to say that how QCs are working and how QCs should be should play their roles in higher education in Pakistan. For international context, we included in our curriculum ideas such as, curriculum accreditation standards such as of AACSP, ABIT, or with me, Federation for Medical Education. So this is a quick background. This is the second semester of this program. Dear participant, I'm glad to introduce you to Dr. Anka. I got introduction to Dr. Anka 2 years back when she was kind enough to agree to be a speaker in an international conference organized by Pakistan Network for Quality in Higher Education. And for the first time, I met her in Khairpur. And after that, I came to know a lot about her. She has been working in different countries, including Saudi Arabia. And in one of the institutions who worked with her, I had a chance to work with them as well. So it's good to see that she has extensive ground in education. And I'm sure that today's talk would be of great value for all of you. I would request all of you to please keep your mind muted till she opens question answer session, so that you can note down your questions, whatever questions come to your mind. Please do not raise the hands till she finishes or she opens a forum for question answer. Saeed Saab, do you want to add something?
Thank you very much, Dr. Usmani. And this is the second time we are going to listen her, as she was invited by Synergy in one of the workshop arranged for the impact ranking, and that was a very good experience for all the participants present there. And inshallah, we are going to listen her the second time, and we'll learn a lot. Over to you, Dr. Anka, please.
Thank you very much. I will switch between windows, and I hope it's not going to be very impactful. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Usmani, for the introduction. I was fortunate enough to be quite close, I would say, to the Pakistani quality assurance work higher education system. Going back to two conferences of PINCAHE, and then later on, well, now PINCAHE has a quality assurance journal that I have been appointed to lead as editor-in-chief. So stay tuned, because we are going to relaunch it, the refreshed version of the PINCAHE Journal for Quality. If you are quality assurance professionals or people that have an interest in the field, then you would definitely enjoy the contributions in the journal. The journal has been published previously. Now it's revamped in a closer alignment to the HEC guidelines, basically. And But that's it. No more on that topic. Relaunched because I think that it's promising. To add just a bit more about myself, I've started working in quality assurance many years ago. I think I'm 16. I did my PhD in quality assurance and accreditation systems, and I'm passionate about this topic. I've been working both internally as quality assurance director at my current institution in Switzerland, then on a multiple campus institution in Africa, and then in the Middle East as well. And that has given me the exposure to the internal challenges on promoting quality assurance or advancing quality assurance notions and principles throughout institutions, which are sometimes resistant to change. And I've also had the external experience. I've been conducting accreditations for program institutions and quality assurance agencies. I think more than 55 or so by now in many countries. And I'm also engaged with a number of governments in consulting for development of standard frameworks. I've done so in Romania as well, when I was appointed advisor to the Minister of Education. So this is to say that I want to believe I have an informed global perspective of quality assurance challenges, trends, priorities currently, and the ones who passed or which passed. So I hope you will find it interesting, and I'm looking forward to the clarifications and questions and debates after. So I will try, because I was informed that the audience is quite diverse in profile, I will try to have references to both, which those of you working at institutional level would relate to closer, as well as external quality assurance. Sorry, I hear that there was a microphone that went on, and when that happens, I fear that maybe there is something wrong on my end. So I would appreciate if we keep the microphones off for the time being. So when we speak of global priorities, I will start with artificial intelligence because it has been the hot year or so. We've seen some institutions embracing it in the sense that many faculty members have shown themselves willing to accept that students will use it. So since it's not something that we can block, some faculty members preferred to encourage students to use it as long as they also give the right acknowledgements or that they work with the information generated by artificial intelligence. Other institutions blocked it. There are universities who literally blocked access to artificial intelligence platforms while on campus. And other institutions have quality assurance mechanisms to brace for impact. And I use this notion because indeed it has been seen in multiple instances as a threat to original work and academic integrity and ethics. So one of the implications has been indeed that faculty members, academic staff were challenged to revisit how learning is actually measured and how to write assessments that are not cheatable. At the institutional level, and even in my position as quality assurance manager, director, we had to revisit some of our strategies and our integrity policies and what we say about the use of artificial intelligence at classroom level. Nationally, quality assurance accreditors were also pushed to revise their policies and to develop new frameworks or to adapt their existing frameworks to evaluating learning authenticity, or to see to what extent institutions are evaluating learning authenticity. My personal judgment is that the trend is still the notion, the concept of generative AI is still massively underutilized. Not many faculty members are using artificial intelligence in, for example, designing assessments. Not many faculty members are using AI to assess written assessments or research papers or other academic outputs for coherence, for plagiarism, or adherence to academic standard, and therefore not making the most use of supporting consistency and objectivity and grade feedback. Likewise, at the institutional level, not many institutions use artificial intelligence to, for example, let's say, analyze student performance, to identify patterns, or to evaluate teaching effectiveness and learning gaps. And finally, not many institutions use it for the preparation of, for example, self-study reports in the avenue of accreditation visits or any documentation that is required for accreditation. In which case, artificial intelligence could be used at least to summarize a large data sets or generating narrative insights. So looking at this particular trend, we've seen that there was considerable impact at both institutional. I'm sorry? As I said, because my screen shows the PowerPoint, when I hear something, I think there's something wrong with the connection. So I would appreciate if we keep the microphones off. So yes, there has been impact of the artificial intelligence, but I would say it's still underutilized to its potential. The second trend or priority that can be observed in quality assurance is what we call society impact as a third mission pillar of higher education institutions. So, and this one, my bad, I don't remember having conversations in the Pakistani context. If indeed the mission statements of institutions have consistently and generally been integrated. So if society impact has consistently been integrated as a third mission pillar in all higher education institutions or only some, but in general, it has been quite a strong trend. Moreover, for the past year, there has been this conversation that we should not even call it third mission, because if it's third, it gives the impression that it's less important, when in fact it's not, and that the society impact is too important to be kind of placed in a ranking that makes it look like it's less important. So the notion of society impact as the third mission pillar has impacted quality assurance frameworks. Externally, regulators are assessing what is the society contribution that universities have. There has been a push for impact evidence, because we have different funders or governments and stakeholders that are expecting very specific measurable outcomes from the society impact mission of universities and what activities they're conducting in that regard. But also, activities related to society impact are very, very diverse and very context specific, which makes them difficult to assess with standardized QA tools. And that drives innovation in quality assurance practices, including narratives, reporting, case studies, or participatory methods. That's in terms of reputation and strategic positioning, we are able to see universities using the society impact component of the mission statement to differentiate themselves globally. So from the quality assurance perspective, we see quality assurance processes which now must account for these new strategic ambitions, ensuring that engagement initiatives are not only visible, but also aligned with institutional missions and national priorities. Looking at the third global trend and priority. I would say this is not that new. It's not the last year. It has been years now. And my colleagues even had presentations on this topic at the PINCAHE conferences in the past, micro-credentials, which have been quite a challenge to current traditional quality assurance frameworks. Because as we know, traditional quality assurance systems or accreditation systems are built for degrees, which are long-term credit-bearing programs. And therefore, they struggle to some extent to assess the quality and relevance and consistency of other formats of education. So the existence, from that perspective, the existence of micro-credentials quite demanded for quality assurance processes to be agile and more responsive, and to balance speed with rigor to ensure the credibility of these degrees, but without being in the way of innovation. At the same time, there was the pressure for transparent standards and recognitions, because notions such as credit equivalency and stackability of micro-credentials did not previously have clear criteria in the frameworks of quality assurance agencies. So that was another pressure that came from this trend or priority. And last but not least, micro-credentials do indeed impact how the higher education sector looks today, because they are expanding access to education and encouraging lifelong learning. Again, from the quality assurance point of view, we must adapt to ensure that these new pathways do maintain the quality and align with the existing educational standards. Another trend that I would not say it's incredibly new. There are many discussions and sometimes challenges to harmonize quality assurance standards across borders. There is pressure from regulators to align their standards across countries to ensure mutual recognition. How the Bologna process started, that's how the African standards and guidelines were developed, or that's why they were developed. And also the Asia region has a similar project, and Europe has the European standards and guidelines for higher education, particularly to complexity in evaluating this cross-border education. For agencies and regulators in general are in the situation of assessing programs that are delivered in very different cultural and institutional context. Quality assurance systems also have the challenge of assessing global engagement and international learning outcomes, and even internationalization of curriculum when we speak of comparability of the content of different programs. So we do, from the internationalization point of view, there is the pressure of demonstrating the global relevance and competence. There was the opportunity, however, in cross-border quality assurance collaboration to have this mutual learning and cooperation amongst institutions and quality assurance agencies, and then different projects were conducted to share best practices and capacity building. When we move to the next trend, I feel from my work in external quality assurance, and even at the institutional level, I feel that the integration between quality assurance and the sustainable development goals is a younger trend, but it is definitely becoming a priority, in the sense that quality assurance agents, regulators or accreditors start to integrate in their accreditation frameworks to what extent institutions are promoting through their work the SDGs. I was mentioning currently I invest in Switzerland. The accreditor here has in the accreditation standards a specific reference that the institution has to contribute to the sustainable development. There is even a particular standard which says that our institutional commitment to the SDGs has to represent a section in our strategic plan as well. And that has been noticed in other parts of the world where accreditors are more thorough in assessing the institutional contributions to SDGs. This means that there was an increased expectation, as we know, when something becomes, I think someone is drawing on my screen. How is that possible? Can you undo that, please? And not do it. So yes, we do have to acknowledge that quality assurance regulators have the power to determine institutional priorities, and therefore, by integrating SDGs in accreditation standards, institutions are actually expected to demonstrate their contribution to society goals. Likewise, from an academic point of view, there is expectation for institutions to integrate or to embed the SDGs into teaching engagement, and particularly in the content of the curriculum, as well as in the methods of teaching. Quality assurance frameworks are also adapting in considering these SDGs related indicators specifically to promote transparency as well as global benchmarking as a tool of comparability. And finally, there is this challenge of measuring impact beyond the academic world. We are evaluating real-world contributions to the SDGs, but that requires quality assurance to move beyond traditional academic metrics and embrace more qualitative methods. So I see that drawing stayed, and unfortunately, I don't know how to get rid of it. But if there is a moderator or someone from the host institution that can fix that, I would appreciate it very much, because it is troublesome. So
ये नोमान, sorry, Dr. Anka, just to disturb you. नोमान जरा इसको चेक करेंगे कौन आ रहा है बीच में, ये लाइन भी आई हुई है स्क्रीन पर, इसको जरा चेक करें नोमान. I have given the instructions, please, Dr. Anka, you may start again.
Yes, so my kind request is to also to remove the current drawing and maybe prevent the participants from drawing even by accident. I want to believe that they wouldn't do it intentionally, but maybe restrict the rights to have intervention on the presentation. One of my favorite kind of notions, I would not say it's a recent trend, because at least in Europe it has been happening for almost 20 years now, but it does remain a priority, and that is stakeholder engagement. This is the reason why also the latest PGD conference had the topic of stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement in quality assurance will remain a priority only or firstly from the perspective of understanding that different stakeholders have different perspectives, all of them useful, all of them different, all of them coming with different lenses, but definitely bringing added value to how we design and manage our programs, or how we conduct quality assurance processes institutionally and nationally. So this trend that has been happening for, as I said, 20-something years, saw in many parts of the world students in accreditation panels, students being engaged in governing boards of regulators, representatives of the labor market, and employers or world of work in a general sense being engaged in accreditation teams. Again, with the acknowledgement that their different perspectives do have added value, even though they're coming from a different place. And often we have the criticism that students are not as educated as academics, or they have not spent 15 plus years in an institution, but they do definitely just a different added value from their level. So stakeholder engagement, to give it its right credit in terms of impact, brought the shift towards a more inclusive and participatory quality assurance, which have been evolving to include input from students and employers and but also community partners from the third mission point of view. That has contributed to enhancing relevance and employment. That brought industry and employers closer to the curriculum design and program reviews, and therefore increasing the trust that the representative of the world of work have in the academic offering. It also brought an increased institutional accountability and transparency, because giving access to stakeholders to different types of information and, as I said, increased transparency has increased also the public trust, not only the labor market trust, by making quality assurance more transparent and open to external perspective. That was also one of the sources of challenge in balancing the diverse expectations, because each of the stakeholders that are engaged may prioritize different aspects of quality. Employers would prioritize practical skills, academics would want to prioritize academic rigor, students would want to prioritize student-centered learning or social dimension. Nevertheless, it has been a driver of continuous improvement and innovation. Having those different contributions sometimes challenge institutional assumptions, but are helping quality assurance systems focus in expecting improvement and, continuous improvement, really. Transparently being communicated to them. One other priority, also not very recent as a global trend, but still on the wave very much, emphasis on learning outcomes and student-centered approaches. Student-centered learning is not new, but there can be observed a slight from inputs to outcomes. There have been in different parts of the world trends of movement towards demonstrating what students actually know and can do at the end of a course, using clearly defined and measurable learning outcomes, as opposed to measuring input and process related indicators during implementation processes. That has given greater accountability to stakeholders, because from that perspective, and society goals. In some parts of the world, this trend brought different conversations, and I think I might have mentioned this in one of the previous conferences. When we speak of alignment with the labor market, there are some countries, and I remember a conversation in Scotland, where they were saying, well, we do have to take the dialogue with the labor market with a pinch of salt, because if, for example, we have a program review process and representatives from the world of work are engaged, they would want to make sure that the content of our program makes students fit into the box of one specific employer, whereas that's not what we want to our students. We want our students to have competencies that are more transferable. We want our students to be more mobile across the labor market. And therefore, one must avoid the getting so close to the level that we educate students to fit in the particular boxes rather than having expandable competence set. In terms of curriculum and assessment, quality assurance regulators are map learning outcomes to teaching methods and assessment, and they ensure the consistency and coherence of all of those. That is more often happening at program level, obviously not at the institutional level. There are organizations which are on the professional accrediting bodies. I remember a few in the business accreditation world, which are conducting their processes exclusively from the perspective of the outcome assessment plans. Nothing about the input, nothing about the current, about the ongoing processes during the education process, but this correlation between intended learning outcomes and teaching methods and assessment strategies. We do see a focus on outcomes, which is encouraging institutions to use more data-driven evaluation of student performance and feedback. From that perspective, this emphasis on learning outcomes and student-centered learning approaches has been supporting continuous improvement at the institutional level. And finally, and this is the bit that is not very new, there is an empowering of students in the learning process. So now we have quality assurance frameworks out there in the world which are assessing how institutions foster inclusive and engaging and flexible learning environment that, after all, do put students at the center. There are specific indicators looking at, for example, how flexible and interactive the teaching methods are, how inclusive the support systems are. Particularly post-pandemic, there has been even an increased focus on well-being from a mental as well. And that is part of the older narrative on how do we transition from a paradigm of delivering information in classroom to the classroom only providing a framework where, or a space where students discuss information, how to distinguish the correct from false information. They argue information, but do not witness the delivery of information from A to B, because virtually information is everywhere, and therefore we don't need a classroom to do that. So from that point of view, the trend is aligning to this paradigm shift on what is student-centered learning expected to do in education. Another trend, also not new, but remaining a priority, quality. I would say, even though digital and online learning are not new as a notion, we still have shifts in prioritization in quality assurance. There is a demand for equivalent standard qualities, and the centers are more and more demanding in their expectation that online education meets the same quality benchmarks as traditional learning in person. And therefore, many quality assurance systems started to assess learning design, digital pedagogy, and student interaction more rigorously when taking place in virtual environments. So while digital and online learning are not new, the fact that quality assurance systems are more and more inclusive of this method of delivery is still like a shifting sand. There has been, and this is in the wake of the pandemic as well, a rapid growth of online, blended, and hybrid programs, which have forced quality assurance framework to evaluate not just content, but how the education is actually delivered, what is the engagement, and what is the technology behind it, and how effective that is in digital formats. there has been a focus on inclusiveness as part of this digital accessibility, because it is part of the quality assurance priority, I would say, to consider if institutions are ensuring access to digital learning and support systems for students with disabilities or different levels of connectivity. That's why I remember during the pandemic or recently after, I was in Africa, and there was a conversation about connectivity allowing students to do synchronous learning, synchronous as in what we do now, or asynchronous learning where students access recordings in their own time based on the level of connectivity that they can afford, and when they can afford is a better option. And that, of course, starts with also with the acknowledgement of different learning needs. Also, in terms of integration of digital and online learning quality, concern to the quality assurance world to ensure secure, fair, and valid online assessment methods. Specifically, institutions were required to demonstrate how they can uphold that standards even in digital environments as well. That included not only plagiarism checking for assignments or different essays and submissions by students, but also proctoring synchronous examinations. And there was a wave of platforms at some point on how to proctor exams, basically. And finally, that brought a need for digital competence with educators and students. Quality assurance frameworks do examine faculty readiness and professional development for online teaching, but also the type of training that institutions provide to equip students to grow their digital literacy skills. And that has reflected indeed a shift of more institutional responsibility for digital competence for both students and academic staff. And then a few thoughts before we conclude. There has been a shift in terms of accreditation methods. There has been a shift from program level accreditation to institutional approaches in many parts of the world, which comes from the perspective of enforcing institutional ownership, acknowledging, and this is actually one of the principles in the African standards and guidelines and the European standards and guidelines for quality assurance in higher education. I hope you are familiar with those documents. If you are not by now, you should definitely open them, because to me, they are the most central document of quality assurance. There are 3 parts for internal, external, and agency level. So do have a look, both of them. Well, the ASG have been inspired from the ESG, which have been working for some 20 years now or so. So anyway, in both documents, there is the acknowledgement that higher education institutions have the primary responsibility for the quality of their provision and the assurance of quality of their provision. I hope that everything's okay, because the mic gets me confused. So this is to say that that the institutions are the ones that understand their responsibility to assure the quality of their operations. It is not expected for regulators to do that. So we've seen a number of countries that initially started with program accreditation standards and or institutional from the start, but then have decided to abolish the program accreditation standards after a number of cycles of accreditation, acknowledging that institutions have already become familiar with quality assurance and standards and stakeholder engagement. So after a number of cycles of kind of educating or doing some capacity building in higher education institutions, institutions have demonstrated their readiness to take ownership for assuring the quality of their operations at program level, and then therefore the regulators only kept the institutional level accreditations. And that has indeed encouraged a more strategic or integrated approach to quality assurance at the institutional level. To me, it's very important to underline that this happens after a number of program accreditations which support the institutional capacity building. I worked in some parts of the world which established quality assurance systems without doing program accreditations from the start, and therefore the number of programs in those countries has reached hundreds and thousands. For small systems, that's a lot. With very, very small number of students, because there was no control mechanism in place and the quality was rather doubtful. There are a few exceptions in some parts of the world where required because those higher education systems were established with public institutions only from the start. Public institutions that are historically funded by governments, and therefore there is a different level of trust between ministries and institutions which are public. However, there is the challenge, which is sometimes underlined by experts, that institutional evaluations, which are broad in nature, do not always capture concerns that are discipline specific, like professional standards in fields like medicine, law, or engineering. And that's why these are regulated professions continue to require supplementary program level reviews or hybrid models. At the end of the day, certain countries, and recently it was Slovenia and the Netherlands, which have abolished the program level accreditations, they do bring up the argument of duplicating work and saving on resources if institutions were to continue to do both types of accreditations at the same time. However, it does require an initial transition that brings significant investment in terms of quality assurance infrastructure, resource basically. One other trend that I would say was successful in the past years more in Australia and the UK. It's not yet as strong as I believe it should be. For reasons related to trust, and I will explain that in a minute. It's risk-based external quality assurance, and it refers to situations where if a certain higher education institution has been through accreditation processes, they have demonstrated already that they are familiar and they are able to maintain the quality to demonstrate it. They should get a break, basically, by having either a reduced, an accreditation window. So instead of 5 years to be visited every 7 years, or a reduced burden. For example, if the institution has demonstrated compliance with the standards for a number of consecutive accreditation processes, then the next one should no longer assess the same standard, but only a focused accreditation in areas that have been identified as in need of improvement on previous occasions. So basically, regulators would then be able to allocate their oversight based on how they perceive the risk of quality failure in institutions or programs. This is to say, if there is a positive track record, you give them a break, you save on resources. So rather than treating all institutions equally, you would have institutions with a stronger track record, which have a lighter scrutiny, while institutions that have demonstrated a higher risk would receive more intensive reviews. is indeed a focus of resources on the higher risk institutions, which sometimes can lead to perceptions of unfair treatment. But that is only happening if the criteria and processes are not clearly communicated or applied consistently, which are very, very important conditions for risk-based approaches to be implemented. That is encouraging institution, what we were mentioning earlier about the ownership for the quality assurance and quality of their operations. Risk-based approaches do indeed encourage institutions to strengthen internal quality assurance. Being motivated with this inducement of receiving lighter external oversight. It does indeed require reliable data and very transparent risk criteria in order to fairly assess and monitor institutional risk. The last trend, I think we can identify an instrumental use of quality assurance. In my opinion, the word instrumental is both positive and negative. In the Bologna process, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, quality assurance is one of the success stories. We have transferable credits, we have social dimension and student-centered learning and so on, which are also concepts that were brought along by the Bologna process. Quality assurance is one of the success stories. And as such, it has been effective to promote certain educational policies, like the ones that I mentioned earlier, at both institutional and national levels. Just to make it a bit more specific, at institutional level, as the person responsible for quality assurance, I have a quality assurance framework and the quality assurance strategy. And if my quality assurance strategy includes observing student-centered learning, that automatically reflects a prioritization of my institution. So in this case, the quality assurance system is pushing a concept to be prioritized at the grassroots level. Likewise for, let's say, social dimension or strategic planning. A notion that becomes part of my quality assurance strategy is cascading to be prioritized at different levels within the administration and with the academics. And likewise for external frameworks. If regulators include, let's say, SDGs, because we talked about that earlier, or internationalization in their accreditation frameworks, institutions therefore prioritize those notions. So in this sense, quality assurance has been actually effective promoting certain tools and certain notions at both institutional and national level. On the other hand, we had, and this is where we're speaking of the negative impact of quality assurance, or the negative instrumental use of quality assurance, in situations where politicians have acknowledged that quality assurance is powerful and that accreditation decisions can be used for I don't know if we can ask the person to mute themselves, please. So we have notions, we have many countries where for political purposes. We saw the news in the US for the past months. I think the called accreditation his secret weapon. We are yet to discover what that means. There have been a few decisions relating to accreditors, but nothing as impactful to make it seem as a weapon. We do see, however, governments which are using accreditation decisions to control institutions. And there was a recent example in Georgia where there were governmental elections, and a certain university which was very vocal in protesting against the government received the negative accreditation decisions very untransparently. it was clear because the accreditation board meeting was public and was recorded. There was no evidence as to why the negative decision has been made, other than the institution being vocal against the government. And similarly, in Hungary, the government forced a university to move outside of Hungary because there were pieces of legislation that basically declared outside of the law certain of the activities of the university. A few final thoughts in terms of trends and priorities. There is some pushback, but rankings are here to stay. There was public criticism at some point when the European Commission allocated public funds to a project called U Multirank. There are strong voices against rankings. There is no doubt there. There is even a book called Where You Go Is Not Who You Are. And yet, for all the wrong reasons, in my view, that's my personal opinion, rankings continue to inform decisions and choices of students and parents and employers. To me, it has very little relevance. For example, that the University of Vienna had a Nobel Prize laureate 200 years ago, which is impacting the university place in the ranking, but has zero relevance for the quality of the student learning experience. And we can see a lot of discrepancies between the type of indicators that are used in certain rankings and how those standards actually reflect the academic rigor or the student-centered learning or social dimension or other aspects that students may care about. Another kind of trend or priority that I would say there are ongoing conversations about this apparent conflict between accountability and enhancement goals of quality assurance. Historically, quality assurance as a notion was established to meet both purposes of accountability and enhancement. And just to be clear, in case you haven't discussed this already, when we say accountability here, we mean the role of external quality assurance to confirm that a provider complies with the minimal threshold of externally established standard, which is a duty to both the students and the society at large. On the other hand, when we say enhancement, we mean the role of quality assurance to contribute to the continuous development of institutional operations in the provider that it evaluates. However, it sometimes happens that the two may appear as contradictory or sabotaging each other. The enhancement component is conditioned by institutional honesty and self-reflection and commitment, which may appear difficult in systems where the accreditor has to confirm minimal compliance. That by itself brings punitive measures in terms of the very existence of the institution. And likewise, the accountability component also implies that sometimes governments are connecting funding and external quality assurance processes. And I think that is the case in Pakistan as well. So there is a cross-board belief that attaching any financial impact to external quality assurance reduces considerably the self-critical capacity and honesty of the institution. And from that perspective, quality assurance gains larger stakes. But basically, it encourages institutions to respond in ways which they thought they could get benefit in terms of finance, but it might encourage the institution. And finally, quality assurance and this is both a priority but also a challenge, I would say, that quality assurance is expected to respect different definitions of quality, which are subjective and contextual and individual. One of the authors, because I did a way too long literature review in my PhD, and one of the authors say that the definition of quality is slippery. To say that it means different things to different people in different contexts, but the quality assurance is expected to assess all those meanings. That is why some authors also define quality assurance in higher education as a process aimed at building stakeholder confidence that an institution or program or meets the agreed upon standards of quality. And I don't know if you were in any of the rooms where I spoke, because I do give this example quite honestly, quite frequently. Because I was part of so many accreditation visits, sometimes I ask people in the room, what does quality education mean to you? And the answers are so different and so adapted to the national context or to the institutional context that sometimes it's virtually impossible to find ways of measuring it or addressing all the definitions from different stakeholders. And that was it from my end. I am 3 minutes early. And now we are open for questions and comments. I will stop sharing my screen so that I can also put you up and see you. Thank you.
I'll take the turn first. Thank you, Anka. A very insightful discussion and a very comprehensive coverage of QA topics. I'll quickly update you about some of the priority areas that we have already adopted in our context. Probably you might have heard of PSG 2023. That is the new QA policy in Pakistan. And in this policy, stakeholders' engagement has been made mandatory, and students' inclusion is one of the significant shift in the engagement. So we are all going to take students on board in our QA forums. Almost all the university have included, but this is a fact that there is a resistance. Some universities are still struggling and they are not ready to accept a student as a member in QA body. The second priority area that you mentioned was, out of many, sustainability was another one. And many universities are now focusing on sustainability in their curriculum, though it is not linked with QA, but sustainability is one of their priority areas. The next is outcome-based education and its alignment with the labor market. Fortunately, in the new framework, there is a great emphasis on outcome-based education and its alignment with labor market. Finally, the area that we are still to work on is online and digital learning quality assurance. Although there is a policy, but still online and digital learning is not adaptive to QA measures that are usually proposed. And the most important point that you just mentioned about if some institutions are doing well, QA efforts should not be that heavy on their part. So this is the part of a new QA framework. If any university is performing well, then QA cycle will not be that repeated for that institution. So it's now 5 years if somebody is performing well. And finally, the instrumental use of QA, to be honest, in Pakistan, we have not yet got such a story till now. Yeah, for the approval of or establishment of a university, this is a possibility of political interventions or political influence. But for quality assurance, fortunately, we are not using it as instrumental for penalizing institutions or anyone who is raising voice. Thank you. A very comprehensive discussion. I will request all my participants, if they have any question, please go ahead.
Before we go ahead, I do want to respond to one thing. I'm actually very happy to hear that the stakeholder engagement has been made mandatory. I am a strong advocate, to be quite frank with you, not because I'm a former student representative, but because at the institutional level, as a quality assurance manager, I see I need student representatives. If I'm writing today a student agreement, which is a document that students sign before joining the institution, I want to have a dialogue with the student to understand if the document includes everything that it should, includes everything that is useful to them. Or one of the other things that I'm in charge of is surveys. I would like to have a conversation with the student about how many surveys is too much, how many questions in a survey is too much. Those questions so that students understand them, because I have a different background. When I start speaking about threshold and benchmark, I am losing students. I want to know how do I build my tools and instruments in quality assurance to get, and I think I often try to have a mathematical conversation. Like, all of you, if you think of an institution, a random higher education institution in Pakistan, count the number of staff and count the number of students. Students make up 80% on average of our academic communities. How can we not incorporate their voices in how we run our educational delivery? If they are such a big part of our academic communities, I'm a strong advocate for including student voice. If we want professionals in the labor market that are critical, that are self-analytical, if we want citizens that are able to recycle or to vote, if we want people that are engaged and active citizens, it is the job of higher education to build them by giving them more autonomy on how their learning process looks, how their learning journey can be impacted and positively influenced through their own voice. So I'm happy to hear it's out there. Quite frankly, because I'm a strong supporter, and I want to say that for good reasons.
Let me just add one more thing. When you say that you talk to students about how they respond to survey, what is the number of questions, you know the problem. This is the problem that we have been facing. We have got 350 students in a class. Every student has to fill one form at least 6 to 7 times. And if there are 20 questions, that is multiplied by 5 to 6. This is a huge number. I wish we could reach to that stage, but I'm quite sure since we have started adding students, we'll reach to that stage that we'll be able to convince the regulator to let us decide the number of questions or number of surveys to be administered. Thank you, Anika.
No intention to make a dialogue here, but I think it would be useful for the participants as well. From the educational policy point of view, there is a very, very interesting trend that I noticed in the last 3 years at my institution, but also I noticed it in the universities that I do accreditations for, which is how do we keep students engaged with surveys? To me, that answer was by assuring student trust in the fact that we actually do something with those surveys. So I managed to increase the response rate, doubling really the response rate at my institution, doubling it by doing two things. One, after every term where we conduct the academic survey, which is the same as you, one survey for each faculty members times 5 to 6 courses per term, it is students engage with it differently if, one, they see the results published, don't mention the names of faculty, we just post average of results per each question, gives the assurance that someone does something about the results, as opposed to their opinions simply going out there in the oblivion. That one. Two, when we publish those results, the last slide is always a slide of commitments. I go to the Dean of Academics and I say, these are the main conclusions. Please make a few commitments. What do we commit to do, to address by the end of the year, for example? And then we also have across campus, we publish in the form of you said we did posters, the action based on student feedback. Because complaints travel very quick, but the solutions and actions that we take based on student feedback doesn't travel as quick if we don't, bring our part in increasing the transparency. So I would say students' response rate is connecting to increasing student trust in the surveys, which is assured by one, increasing transparency of results, acting on student opinion, and then telling them what did you do with those feedback. And in fact, since last term, but I'm still waiting for the graphic designer, we agreed with the dean to include two sections. Based on student feedback, this is what we did, and this is what we did not do, and we will not do. So for example, if a student, I'm sorry?
No, this is good. This is interesting to know.
Yes. So to give an example, there was one comment that there were not enough, I think, books of a certain topic, and we said that we will not be addressing this because we are prioritizing increasing access to journals and online library and not the physical library. Or something related to the cafeteria. So I think it's important to also say what you will not do and why. And that, again, does not give the feeling that their opinions are left out. And if you want, but I would be happy to do that as soon as the graphic designer finishes the new format of these posters, because until now we were only publishing what we did. And I would be happy to send you the picture of what we didn't do and why, just as the best you want to consider doing the same. I think we have a question in the chat, and I don't mind. I think we still have some 20 minutes if there would be more questions. So in today's era, all educational institutions are trying to stop the unethical use of AI. What are the role of the quality? The QAC is the enhancement cells at the institutional level, I think. In charge and responsibilities to uplift the academic integrity, we cannot check each and every document for AI plagiarism. So I think I would want first the institutional perspective from maybe Dr. Osmani, if you don't mind. So what is the role of the quality enhancement cells in charge and responsibilities to uplift the academic integrity, because we cannot check each and every document for AI. And that would make it more contextual, and then I will add from my perspective.
Okay, although this happened in many universities, that quality enhancement cell were asked to check the originality of the research papers or the thesis submitted to the university. Although it was not their job, but they were supposed to use Turnitin and identify the use of technology or the AI that is detectable by Turnitin, and of course from other sources, online sources. What happens now that students are now clever than the QA professionals. So they use AI and then they rephrase it using some other tools, making it more human. And then they tailor the language and then present to the university. Now, clearly, there is no defined parameters except the limitations of technology used in Pakistani context. But we are still struggling. QA professionals are asking continuously in different groups that how do you handle AI use in research publication or thesis? So this is the current scenario.
Dr. Anka, can we really prevent students to use AI in the classroom, or there should be some room for them to use it. So to some extent, they can be allowed to use AI, and after that, they may be restricted to use. So can there be something like this, or can we prevent them using at all AI?
My answer would be no, but the answer would be that we also should not. Because so we want to educate students that fit in the outside world where there is AI. In the outside world, in the world, they will have to use AI. I mean, not have to, but it is something that can improve our life. So, but if we want them to be equipped with all the skills that they would need, including how to work with AI for the world of work, I'm not talking about, very practical courses, but in a general sense. Why do we? I think we have a responsibility to know how to use AI because it's unavoidable out there. So if you ask me, it's irresponsible not to let students to use AI because it would be something that they are facing once they leave the institution. However, I think it's our responsibility to invest in equipping faculty on how to operate with this. So I've seen on LinkedIn quite soon after ChatGPT was. I will try to find it maybe at the same time because it was an absolutely outstanding case. But if I don't, I will just drop it. There was a situation where a faculty member posted on LinkedIn his approach to what was the instruction that he was giving to students in his classroom, and it was basically, I'm not going to tell you not to use AI. I'm going to ask you to use it and acknowledge it, and then maybe compare and contrast and critically assess the information that was provided. I don't seem to be able to find it right now, so I will have to drop it. But anyway, it was an instance where a faculty member was demanding students to use AI and to acknowledge it. I do not think we should block it. Absolutely. But I did want to add something to the previous question. If we cannot say that the institution has the capacity to assess all assignments to anti-plagiarism softwares, I think that quality assurance systems, which are in my equipped to moderate the relation between different internal stakeholders, should make a decision whose responsibility it is. If the institution, in the sense of administration, doesn't have the capacity to process all the theses or assignments with the AI, then assign some of that responsibilities to coordinators. Or if the coordinator or supervisors, how you want to call them, if they can't, then assign it to students and ask to include the similarity score or the similarity report in the second page of the thesis. So if it's a matter of capacity, the institution itself can dedicate that responsibility to someone else if the institutional administration cannot do it all. Or you can do a sample, but I would be definitely in favor of dividing the responsibility between administration, faculty, and students to reduce the burden, the administrative burden on the anti-plagiarism software. And also, very, very importantly, systemically, I would prevent or try to discourage academic dishonesty by increasing the accountability of the professor or the coordinator. The coordinator would be more committed to help the institution identify plagiarism if they know that there are sanctions for him individually in case they are caught. So let's say the administration is assigned as being responsible to detect plagiarism. If it is detected that the student plagiarized, to have some form of sanction for the coordinator or supervisor of the thesis as well. And that way, the supervisor and coordinator would be more invested in catching the students earlier in the process. So division of responsibility, but also division of accountability, I would say, for academic dishonesty. But also, I would still dare to say that we should attempt to make assessments that are less cheatable. What's the percentage of assignments? I don't know if you have an institutional policy on how many formative and summative assessments you have, or what is the weight of the summative assessment. But we should be supporting our faculty in diversifying their assessment methods and to consider what are those that make it less likely to use AI. You know that there is AI which detects the use of AI and it can also outsmart students in certain situations by catching the use of AI with the help of other platforms, and then being very strict in sanctioning it again, if not acknowledged. But I would say it requires investing in faculty, equipping faculty on how to react better. And I think there was another question from Soraya, if we made feedback mechanism part of internal qualification
Thank you for the
system.
comprehensive answer.
My pleasure. If we made our feedback mechanism part of the internal qualification system, or is it done by a dedicated QA or accreditation department? So the internal system that I oversee as qualification director has multiple areas, and one of them is survey management. Surveys that are academic and non-academic in nature, students and not students in nature. So yeah, it is a dedicated QA, me, which is responsible. I'm responsible for the implementation of the internal qualification system. Because our institution is very small, we do not have a qualifications department. I am alone in that. But I would, in the feedback conversation, I would say that I'm rather moderating to some extent, because once the results are out, I communicate them to the dean, and then he makes those commitments of what we plan to address. We communicate them to the faculty, and then the faculty has the chance to integrate them in their future work. The dean is also connecting the feedback that he receives from the students in the growth developmental conversations he had with faculty. So I would say that I'm kind of moderating or making sure that the feedback gets from one person to another, but I'm not the one who has to act on it, just to make sure that the commitments are being kept. And there is another question, but I'm not sure I understand it. It says role of AI to support global trends. Is that the question? So if the person wants to expand a bit more, I'd be happy
I
to
don't
Yeah.
think this
use
is
the
a
code.
question. This was just a comment,
this
I
is-
think.
No,
And
no,
this is beyond the purview of this.
no, I just wanted to ask a question. This is Farhana from the PGD class. Thank you, Dr. Anka, for your presentation. So I have a question that what are the challenges you face for implementing and sustaining the new trends and the role of AI in supporting it? And my second question is how you streamline the process in response to the expectations of the different accreditation bodies?
I would say that for the first part of the question, let me write the streamline part so I don't forget it. Two bodies. For the first part, We don't all have to jump on all priorities. Quite frankly, just to look for example, at the SDGs, no institution can jump on all SDGs. We all do as much as we can, comparable to the size of our institutions. I would not say that I'm making use of AI to support the integration of those global trends. Maybe I am even one of those that is underutilizing AI in work. So far, I haven't. Maybe I should, because we do have an upcoming accreditation, which is very, very much connected to the SDGs, and I have the feeling that it's kind of never enough, or at least that's the feeling they give us, that it's never enough, however much we do on it. But yeah, I would say that not enough use of AI in progressing those trends, or at all, really. But I don't feel there is an obligation or commitment to connect to all of those trends and priorities. I believe in the notion of fit for purpose or fit of purpose. Again, the institution is very small. We do as much as we can with the resources that we have. And streamlining the process to fit with quality assurance bodies. As the owner of the internal quality assurance system, my approach is not to use the regulator's expectations very often. I want people to be committed to integrate stream feedback or to do program reviews, because I explain to them why it makes sense. I explain to them why it matters and how it helps us grow as an institution, not because we are expected to by an accrediting body. I believe that quality assurance as a notion cannot survive coming with this police approach. Because the moment you mentioned that something needs to be done because an accreditor is asking, yes, it will get the job done. But I do not think that it is done with the same commitment. I would rather invest 2-3 times the time to explain to a certain stakeholder why he must engage with the program review, because it's improving student learning experience and connecting to the labor market trends at the same time, and da. So, one, I would say how they drive the narrative of regulators' expectations institutionally. There is a higher chance of success if you get the buy-in, if you get someone to believe why a certain mechanism is important and why it would work for them, not because a regulator is asking it. That's one. And two, because you will be educated quality assurance professionals, I think sometimes we have to be able to defend what we are not complying with. And it's a risky conversation, but I would say there are instances where a regulator, a team of experts, teams of experts also have subjective opinions, right? Things that are not explicitly requested in the standards, but subjective opinions, as I said, discretionary, unpredictable, inconsistent. Nevertheless, they make personal, subjective requests. And historically, so for example, I had an accreditation panel at some point which was saying, oh, it is absolutely unacceptable that you do not have an advisory board. I totally, respect your point of view, but we will keep things as they are, because if the role of an advisory board is to make strategies for the world of work, voices in different points in time, in program reviews, in an academic committee membership, in conducting surveys with employers. So you have the chance to defend when you are not doing something exactly as the regulator is asking, as long as you can justify that you are meeting the purpose. If the goal is XYZ, I can demonstrate with facts that I am meeting the goal, maybe in a different way. Or if, for example, the team who said that we should establish the role of head of programs because we didn't, again, we are a very small institution. I want not to do that. I want to explain with our current number of faculty and our current number of students, the dean is more than equipped to handle both two programs, study programs on its own. So I would say we have to be careful to the obedience that we have towards regulators. And for areas where we do have to comply, how do we drive that institutionally? I think makes a difference, makes a whole difference in this understanding of quality culture that at the end of the day everyone has to be accountable for. And by the way, just as a disclaimer, I am with a small institution now, but I was with bigger institutions in the past, and I definitely accredited institutions of like 20,000, 30,000, 37,000 students. So the opinions and everything that I share today is not coming from a small institution places, seeing how things work or don't.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Dr. Anka, this is Suraya. Thank you very much for giving us such a thought-provoking and engaging session today. I'm really honored that you have found your precious time from your busy schedule. And we are really honored to learn from you. And we hope that we'll also be interacting with you in future.
Thank you very much for having me, and then best of luck with the continuation of your studies.
Thank you, Dr. Anka. Thank you.
Have a good day.
And thank you very much, Dr. Anka from
Bye-bye.
Synergy.
Nice to hear from you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.